Now, so many questions have been asked in the past on why world powers have been quiet about what is happening in the DRC and what it will take for the international community to intervene and bring an end to the suffering in the eastern DRC. Well, on this note, the UK's Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, that's the FCDO, has asked for an immediate cessation of hostilities, humanitarian access, and the withdrawal of the Rwanda Defence Forces from Congolese territory. This decision comes in response to the advances made by the Kigali-backed M23 rebel group in the DRC's mineral-rich eastern region, and the UK's actions are a significant move. But the question remains, will international pressure be enough to bring an end to the conflict in the DRC, or will more drastic measures be needed to address the complex web of issues driving the violence? I'm joined by Nixon Katembo. He's an analyst, Great Lakes and East Africa, from Cape Town, South Africa. Yes, and I'm also joined by Paul Nantulya, a senior researcher, U.S. National Defense University. Both gentlemen joining me here to speak on this. Thank you so much for joining me at this time.
Thank you for having us.
All right, so let me begin with you, Paul. Now, Britain's decision to, cease high-level engagement with Rwanda and also suspend most aid marks a notable departure from past policies, no doubt, especially considering that the UK and Rwanda's close ties in recent years and also the controversial migration deal. How do you see this move reflecting a broader realignment, in Western engagement in East Africa?
Yeah, I don't think it's a realignment of Western engagement in East Africa. I think it's a repeat, albeit at a smaller level, of what happened in 2012 when the M23 seized Goma. This is not the first time that the M23 has seized Goma.
Yeah.
In 2012, the M23 seized Goma for about a week, but then there was a mountain of international pressure that came from the United States, from the United Kingdom, from the European Union in particular, because these are Rwanda's most important development partners, but they're also very important security partners. These countries provide Rwanda the financial resources that it needs to deploy peacekeeping troops and peace enforcement troops. Rwanda is the top African troop contributor to peace missions. That is not a small task. So, participation in international peacekeeping and international peace enforcement operations is critical to Rwandese foreign policy and to the Rwandese conception of international prestige. So when these three, the UK, the US, and the European Union, threatened and actually even imposed some sanctions on Rwanda back in 2012, we saw M23 effectively withdraw. And not only that, the M23 collapsed in the wake of an offensive by Southern African Development Community Forces. And M23 was broken up. And it's been dormant from 2012 to 2021. So what we're seeing right now is basically a repeat of what happened in 2012. There is a sense that if Rwanda's Western partners in particular take a strong stand and impose these punitive measures on the country, that President Paul Kagame might change his calculus. That is the reason why the United Kingdom, as you've mentioned, that's the reason why they've taken this approach. The approach has been taken in the hope that Paul Kagame's calculus will change and that there'll be a drawdown and a drawback in forces. It's very difficult to tell, my sister. This time around, it seems to be a completely different scenario. Western countries are very occupied in what is happening with the transatlantic alliance, the future of the transatlantic alliance. There is a lot of back and forth movement regarding what kind of peace Ukraine might have to subject itself to. There's tension between Ukraine and some of its Western partners, and so Western countries are very involved in what might happen to the future, to the transatlantic alliance. That is the one issue. The second issue is that there have been a series of elections in these countries. There have been elections in Italy, there have been elections in Germany, there have been elections in the Netherlands that have brought in governments that are not that focused on international issues, certainly on distant issues such as the Democratic Republic of Congo. And there was an election in the United States, and so it may well be that the M23 and the M23's backers made that calculation that actually this might actually be the perfect time to strike.
All right.
When the international community's attention is basically focused on other things other than a distant conflict somewhere in Africa.
All right. Now let's hear Nixon's thoughts on this. You did say that it's not a realignment on Western engagement, but a repeat. Nixon, let's hear from you. Do you think this is a genuine policy shift or a symbolic gesture with little real impact?
Symbolic gesture instead of a complete shift in policy, particularly if you look at the mild approach that the UK has taken in terms of saying we are pausing. The first M23 attack, they actually cut aid completely, which is a different departure from what they have done today. So assess that they have sort of wait and see approach, whether the Rwandan government will act in a way that seeks to guide the policies in Eastern DRC and to withdraw forces, and therefore having an impact in terms of what they seek to achieve by imposing these restrictive measures in terms of sanctions and so on. But also, at the same time, is sending a clear message to the Rwandan government and a government in the region that business cannot continue as usual, particularly if you singled out the person of General James Kabarebe, who has been very instrumental, and the UN group of experts report point to him as the mastermind behind the operation in Eastern DRC, both at a military strategic level, but also at a command and control of the M23, as well as the planning and the resource funding of the group. And one have to look at also the role that Lawrence Kanyuka play in terms of his economic link with the UK, because in those sanctions, for example, US imposed, they list him as a US citizen. But also, the issue here is not only the sanction, but the broader context of the region in which this particular war of the DRC is happening. You would see that there are geostrategic issues that are at play, given the coltan production in Eastern DRC, about 70% of the world reserve, being critical to the production of cell phone sites such as your iPhone and Microsoft chips and so on. So these are going to dictate the impact of those sanctions. One would think that they will be rigorous and pointedly so in terms of the implementation, for example, cutting completely the supply chain of mineral from Rwanda to the UK. And I think that will be the one issue that will have an impact in this whole sanctioning regime.
Okay. Nixon, let's hear. Now, Paul, back to you. Now, the UK statement, also emphasizes that military means are unacceptable, insisting that there can only be a political solution to the conflict. Do you see Do you agree with this? Do you think that there can only be a political solution to the conflict? And do you think that, you know, it's a realistic view and there can only be a realistic political pathway?
My sister Usman, thank you very much for that question. Look, President Kagame and the U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, had a call. They had a discussion, and after that discussion, President Kagame released a statement, and he said that Marco Rubio, Secretary Rubio, had emphasized precisely this point, that this crisis does not have a military solution, and that President Kagame agreed with Secretary Rubio's assessment. Certainly, looking at the history of conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo, I would definitely also agree with the assessment that this crisis, it has political issues, it has constitutional issues, it has issues to do with administration, it has issues to do with the delivery of services. It also has issues to do with the sensitive matter of statelessness and contested nationality, as well as contested citizenship and so on. It's not the first time that we're seeing it. I mean, Congo has been through numerous cycles of conflict where conflict resolution frameworks were established to respond to precisely these issues that I've just mentioned. You had the 1992 Sovereign National Conference, which unfortunately did not conclude, but nevertheless, it raised some very, very important issues, and it actually created a framework for the Sun City Accord, the inter-Congolese dialogue. And I was fortunate to have participated in this dialogue from beginning to end. I was working for an organization that was roped in by President Thabo Mbeki and the late President Botswana and President Katumila Masire, to provide technical support for the inter-Congolese dialogue. So I was in it from beginning to end. I was also fortunate to participate in the Lusaka peace process, which was a separate process mediated by South Africa that arrived at a ceasefire that got the 7 militaries that were involved in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Second Congo War, that got them to withdraw, including Rwanda. And then on top of that, you had a South African mediated process that reached an agreement called the Pretoria Accord that was signed in 2002 that provided a framework not only for the withdrawal of Rwandan forces from the DRC, but also for joint military operations between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo to address the FDLR, which is a group that Rwanda complains continues to launch attacks into its territory. This is a group that, these are remnants of the Interahamwe, the groups that are implicated in the genocide in Rwanda in 1994. So I personally have been a witness to conflict resolution efforts that have pacified the DRC and have given the DRC an opportunity to have a fresh start politically. Because the problem in the DRC is that there's no political consensus. The problem in the DRC is that you have a persistent problem of legitimacy, and you also have a persistent problem of state collapse in that country, right? And precisely because the Democratic Republic of Congo has these weaknesses, you then have neighboring countries that have designs of one kind or another in the Democratic Republic of Congo that are able to go in and to do all these things that you've just mentioned. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if we learn anything from the First Congo War, from the Second Congo War, and from all these conflicts that are in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, where you have over 120 rebel groups marauding on that population, and you have a military, a government military that is not paid for months, and which also marauds on that population in order to get whatever it can, ultimately, it is not military solutions that will solve these problems. These problems need a political solution. They need constitutional solutions. They need administrative measures and so on. So I'm definitely supportive of that. If indeed the United Kingdom said that this problem does not lend itself to a military solution, I would definitely be supportive of that because of what I have witnessed in various high-level talks that Congolese friends have participated in throughout the conflicts that that country has faced. And it's truly tragic because this is a country that can supply electricity to the entire Africa. This is a country that is rich, that has minerals of all kinds. You know, there's a lot that we do not know that is under the ground in that country. Congo has the potential to be not just an African superpower, but a serious superpower that affects politics in other parts of the world, not just the African continent. If only a political solution can be arrived at that addresses these problems that you've talked about, my sister Usma.
All right, Paul, now let's hear from Nixon, on the same issue. You talked about, agreeing with the UK that it doesn't need a military, solution, but a constitutional and political solution. Nixon, and you also talked about a few peace processes, right? Nixon, what are your thoughts? Do you believe it needs military or political and constitutional solutions? And also talking about, some of these solutions, why do you think that the African-led peace talks have been, which have been held time and time and again in Nairobi, Rwanda, is yet to bring real solutions? The conflict keeps reigniting despite these peace processes.
I think the issue here is the problem of political will in part of those engaging in the process in the Eastern DRC, but also the regional player, Rwanda being the main one, but also countries in the region themselves. There hasn't been enough political will to let Congo pacify in a sense that a disorganized Congo, a Congo that is in a state of chaos, serves as a markets for these countries in the region, particularly those who are bordering the country on the east. But the key issue here that Paul mentioned in this discussion that were in Sun City and in Lusaka, as well as the Pretoria Accord, precisely dealt with the issue of a constitutional crisis, which then resulted with the interim government that had a 4+1, in other words, 1 president and 4 vice presidents, but also the interim constitutions, which then gave birth to the democratic process that and the first democratic election that Congo enjoyed. But the question, to what extent that these discussions that happen across the board in Lusaka, in Rwanda, in Pretoria, have been implemented with a serious political will on the part of the political leadership in the region and in the Congo itself. One of the major deficiencies here, I should point out, is a lack of institutional capacity. In other words, despite all these talks, the institutional framework that was supposed to lay out the foundation for stability in the country are non-existent. And the political ruling elite in the Congo have not been able to master this particular aspect of the nation building. And for me, it started with the security sector reform that was a vision within the framework of the Sun City talks. That how do you reform your security apparatus? In other words, being able to control the security, internal security, and the borders of the country. But the neighbors, such as Rwanda and Uganda and others, view that if that is allowed, then they lose the lucrative markets and the other economic incentives that derive from maintaining stability in Eastern DRC. Of course, international partners, we cannot let these go unnoticed, because those forms part of the discussions on how to stabilize Congo. I was fortunate enough to engage some of the Ugandan authorities who were recently saying that, look, we were imposed a sanction by the West because of our stance on LGBTQ plus community and other issues that pertain to human rights violations. But we have been able to sustain our economy without much Western dependence. And it turns out the biggest sustainer here is the stability in Eastern DRC, because now they have turned Eastern DRC as the biggest market. So one have to look at all these issues globally to really engage in the political process within Eastern DRC, but also that involve the regional player to be able to allow the DRC to take off from the stability that it finds itself right now.
All right. Still on you, Nixon. You did say that, there's a lack of institutional framework in Congo, and it is non-existent. Now, the M23 has actually asserted that it is protecting Tutsi communities from discrimination in Eastern DRC. Yet there are growing concerns that, the group may harbor ambitions of a possible regime change in Kinshasa. Could you shed more light on that? Nixon? All right, we seem to have a problem with Nixon. Let's hear from you, Paul. Now, Paul, in fact, the M23, rebels have actually openly declared its plans, to march to Kinshasa to unseat President Tshisekedi. Would love to hear your thoughts on this, and, if there's any evidence to suggest that, Kigali is also involved in this.
My sister Usman, I was listening to a presentation that was given by somebody that I admire very much. He's Kishore Mabobani, who is a scholar diplomat, Singaporean scholar diplomat, who served his country at a very high level and is now one of the world's foremost authorities on regional security, especially in Southeast Asia. And he said something that really stayed with me. He said that the moment you have to go to war to solve an issue, to solve an issue that has, essentially political underpinnings, it is an indication of strategic incapacity, the lack of strategic capacity, essentially, that war over an issue or over issues that can be resolved constitutionally, it shows the limited view of protagonists in a particular conflict. And I think this is very relevant to the Democratic Republic of Congo. And I say that because of three reasons. The issue that you've mentioned, what I call the statelessness of certain communities in the DRC, communities essentially Congolese of Rwandese ethnicity, Congolese of Rwandese descent, not just Tutsi, but Tutsi, Hutu, and Twa, because that is the composition in Rwanda. That has always been the composition in Rwanda, right? And to understand why that is such a pressing issue, we have to go back to 1885, when certain gentlemen from Europe sat at a conference in Berlin, had a map of Africa, and basically arbitrarily subdivided this continent, not to create viable nation states, but to basically parcel out land and resources in order to reduce conflict among themselves. So the Germans were there, the British were there, the French were there, everybody was there. The Americans were not there, but everybody else was there, parceling out this continent like a piece of cake, right? And these arbitrary boundaries that don't make social and cultural sense, and which also don't make economic sense, became the basis of the modern African state. And when African countries became independent, they took a decision. They said, look, as painful as it is, let us accept these boundaries, as irrational as they are. Let us accept these boundaries in the interest of peace. Now, what that infamous meeting in 1885 did, it basically cut off and split up communities, regardless. So in the case of the Great Lakes region of Africa, the Rwandese, the pre-colonial Rwandese state was expanding its borders. Because of the way in which this region was carved up, there are communities of Rwandan descent that ended up in what became Zaire, or the Democratic Republic of Congo now, today, right? The Banyamulenge, the Banyamasisi, those from Rutshuru, and many other areas. You know, we tend to focus only on the Banyamulenge, but there are many others, right? And these are not just Tutsi, they're Tutsi, Hutu, and Twa, right? Then in Uganda, you have three provinces as well. Hello?
Yeah, Paul, if you can hear me. Now, the reason why I actually asked that, you know, the M23 talking about, you know, unseating the president is because the M23, you know, they're not just fighting, right? They're organizing mass rallies. In fact, there was even a bomb explosion in one of the rallies. They're reopening ferry routes and also retraining defectors. So I asked because, you know, I actually wanted to hear your thoughts on it. And also, are we watching a militia transform itself into a parallel government in Eastern DRC?
Well, M23 has certain characteristics that we did not see back in 2012. It's bigger, it is more organized, it has better armaments, it has better discipline and so on, right? And it's also part of a larger political movement. Right? It's part of a larger alliance, you know, the Congo River Alliance, that is led by Colonel Nanga, who was twice the president of the Independent Electoral Commission of the DRC. So it is articulating issues that go beyond just the Eastern DRC. It is articulating issues that even go beyond the Banyamulenge, this community that I was trying to describe earlier, right? And so there's a sense that it has broader national and perhaps even broader regional objectives, one of which is the removal of the Kinshasa administration. It has said that, Colonel Nanga has said that, and so on. And in terms of the speed at which the M23 has moved, if one looks at previous rebellions, the first Congo War, the second Congo War, because, you know, they all started in the East. Basically, rebellions in the DRC, they tend to start in 5 places: Goma, Bukavu, Uvira, Bunia, and Kisangani. Now, if you look at the rate of movement in the first and the second Congo War, including by predecessors of the M23, right? And then you look at the current thrust of the M23, they're actually moving at a much faster rate. But they're also imposing governance and administrative structures in the areas that they've taken over. We did not see this in 2012. The other thing they're doing is they are absorbing defeated or surrendered, you know, Congolese military and Congolese police that have surrendered are now being taken through political education and being reintegrated and put back on the battlefield as part of M23. We did not see this in 2012. So certainly the M23 has undergone a strategic shift in the process of projecting itself as a national organization that has national objectives. Okay. And I think this is a key difference from what we saw initially. Okay. So yes, it is, you know, that is what the M23 is looking like. Okay. The M23 of 2025 is very different from the M23 of 2012.
All right. Now, I'm told that you're leaving us right now. Thank you so much, Paul, for speaking to us on this very, very important topic.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. All right, now while we're at it, just before we quickly go on a break, I'd love to hear your thoughts, Nixon, if you're here with us. I'm told that you were able to reconnect. Okay, welcome back, Nixon. Now, in addition to what Paul has actually said, he did talk about, sometime in 1995, he talked about security concerns, and most times we often come back to, the legacy of the 1994 genocide, right? Where Rwanda accuses the DRC of harboring Hutu militias linked to the genocide. So how much of this conflict is still shaped by the ghosts of 1994?
I think it will be a reductionist to say that this conflict started in 1994. One can go back beyond what Paul described as a Berlin conference, but there has been a previous encounter where the Rwandan kingdom under King Kigali Rwabugiri tried to expand towards the now South Bukavu province, and he was defeated, actually killed by the Bashi king in the South Kivu towards that expansion. So I can go beyond, but this for the purpose of.
All right, well, we seem to be having network issues with Nixon, but we'll take a quick breather now. When we come back, we'll continue on the conversation. Stay with us. Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us. If you're just joining us on the conversation, we're talking about how the United Kingdom has officially suspended aid, and all other, and also given other sanctions, to Rwanda for backing rebels to fight in the DRC. And we've been speaking to a few people. We've been speaking to Nixon Katembo and Paul Nantulya. And, right now we have Lanre Toluhi with us, to continue this particular conversation. Thank you for joining us, Lanre.
Thank you, Daphne, for having me. It's a great honor.
So let's go ahead and hear your thoughts, on all of this. There's also the question of Western double standards, where the UK was willing to partner with Rwanda on a migration deal, even when Rwanda's human rights record was criticized. So why are Rwanda's actions in DRC triggering such a stronger response now? A lot of people are asking.
Yeah, look, we want to blame the Western world, but African and African nations need to stop blaming the Western world for what has happened to us. We should be holding our leaders accountable, because there should be accountability. Over and over, your station and video stations have been on different fora. I've always said it. Africa should be a power bloc. Africa is actually the main power bloc. The Western world should be begging Africans to come to their aid based on our natural resources deposit, the human resources deposit, and everything. But we've been plagued with leaders that lack mental capacity, or leaders that lack the ability to do what is right for us. We've had leaders that have been clouded with selfish greed and ineptitude as a whole. So that's what's happening. And some want to say there is a double standard. Look, I don't see double standard in it. They are doing this because they know we need them. If we turn the table around and we are being needed, not us needing them, they won't be doing this. But what in this case that the UK is making a stand, but they need to make a stand. Rwanda, we know what happened in Rwanda, and Rwanda is coming out from its ugly past, and a lot of people, some of us, for someone like me, have actually been proud of what Rwanda has been doing with their innovation, being the new hub of innovation and all that in Africa. But I think it is wrong of Rwanda to want to support rebel. You see, a rebel is a rebel. When you have rebels and they are rebels, when you have issues with your governance or political status or political states or the political stuff of your nation, the better way to resolving them, not by taking up arms against the state or all that. There are better ways to fight for these things. There are better ways to call for revolution and all that.
Lanre,
you don't expect the UK, yeah?
Yeah, speaking of having better ways, peace processes mostly, rather than taking up arms. The UK had already said that, the DRC does not need a military solution, but a political one. And, you know, recently, I'm talking about from January, 7,000 people have been killed since, you know, this year alone, since January. 450,000 have been left without shelter after 90 displacement camps themselves were destroyed. And these are staggering numbers if you actually look at it. So why has it, I know you did say that we shouldn't depend on the West, you know, to come and help us. We should be our saviors, especially African countries should rally around and, you know, come together and, you know, fight for what's right. But why do you think it has taken this level of devastation for the international community to start paying closer attention?
It is still what I've said in my opening remark. We kept on always saying international community, international community. What is wrong with African and African leaders? We need to ask ourselves that. What is wrong with us? What is wrong with our leaders? Is it our leadership recruitment process, or is it the structure, or is it the kind of people we are being? Is it our all I call it, our sense of value that is already faulty? Because we look at it every time we're looking for international community, we're looking for international community. What do we need international community for? The international community, guys, the people in the UK, in the US, in France, wherever they are they not human? Were they not created by God? Don't they have the same mental capability? I can tell you, I'm an African now. I went to school in the UK, I went to school in Nigeria, I went to school in the UK. And I can tell you, these guys truly, in terms of having the mental capacity, they don't have what we have. We are a speck when it comes to intellectual capacity. So what happens that we cannot just apply this our mental capacity, our mental capability when it comes to governance? We've seen us always being greedy. We've seen us always being intellectually lazy when it comes to productivity or when it comes to doing what is right. Africans and African leaders love doing what is wrong, because all this we are saying now, it shouldn't have gotten to where it is if we have conscience and if we do things by morals. We have our leaders that are morally bankrupt, and because of the moral bankruptcy we have in Africa, that is why we always see ourselves where we are just looking for foreign aid and looking for Western world to come intervene in all our issues. Is Rwanda or is DRC Congo or DR Congo, are they not a sovereign nation? So if they're a sovereign nation, why can't they do what is right? Are they not human? They should do what is right by themselves. They don't need anybody forcing them to do what is right. Look, it is painful that the Western world colonized the African nations. Now, African nations on their own, even after they claim to have gotten freedom or to have had freedom, they still depend on these, their colonial masters, to come help them at every given time, in time of governance, time of economic emancipation, in time of political emancipation. What is wrong with us? You see leaders that want to hold on to power. They want to hold on to power for forever. Some of them cannot even stand up. Some of them are on hospital bed. You know, we've seen leaders in hospital bed that have been in hospital bed for more than a decade, and they're still holding on to power. What do you need when you cannot even take care of yourself? Why do you need to hold on to power? So these are the things we need to do. All these, for me, I don't blame the UK, I don't blame the US, I'm not blaming any Western world. I will keep saying it, and I've said it over and over again. We are not going to be respected if we don't respect ourselves. There's an adage in my village that says, when you sell your family member as a packer, and you keep objectifying your family member as a packer, it's going to be an outsider that's going to come to use that packer to pack the dust or pack rubbish. That means you are the one that will first disrespect yourself before you get disrespected. Africans and African leaders have been the ones disrespecting themselves. They've shown that they don't have anything they need to move African forward. And that is why every time somebody wants to sanction them, somebody is not sanctioning them, somebody is cutting all the funds and everything. Ask yourself, these people giving us aid, or these aid people are depending on, and talking about this funding, where are they getting the funding? They are getting this funding majorly from raw materials they've taken from Africa.
Okay.
So Larry,
Africans? Yeah, Larry, I hear you, you know, urging, you know, Africans to make sure that they do things on their own rather than wait for the West to, you know, take care of them. Now, still on this, President Tshisekedi has actually just called for a unity government to confront the M23 threat. You know, just like South Africa has a unity government, even though there's a lot happening within that government, you know, a lot of challenges. So this unity government that Tshisekedi has actually called for now, is this a sign of leadership or desperation? Do you think that unity even, you know, can be forged when so many Congolese actually feel abandoned by their own government?
That's what I'm saying. The lack of sincerity or sincerity of purpose, he's calling for unity government. Is he sincere about it? Because if he's sincere about it, because at the end of the day, Congolese there might be a lot of displeasure from Congolese. They might not be trusting what their government is doing. They might be hurting, and they might not. They're actually hurting, and they're feeling ostracized, and they're feeling all that. But if there is genuine reconciliation, if there is genuine call for peace, people want peace. Everybody wants peace. They want something where they can be part of it, because the truth is, their yearnings is just to be part of it, to feel as if they are members of that community, they are members of their country. So if it's calling for a unity government with a sincerity of purpose, with a sincere heart, people will join hands with him. Believe me, people will join hands with him, and they want to do that. But some will tell you they are calling for unity government, they call for unity government, yet you want to guard people, yes, you want to change people. That is where all that will happen. There's a lot of they have a lot of scattered groups, they have a lot of splinter groups, like I want to call it, a splinter group with who are protecting different interests. We understand that in Congo as it is now. But if he's really calling for a unity government and he wants a unity government with all sincerity, that will help them. But he needs to be sincere, he needs to be honest about it, and he needs to show them that truly he means business. He's not just doing it just because he's trying to save face. He's doing it because he has realistically thought about it and feel that is what they need now.
All right, now just before we wrap up, Larry, after decades of mass killings, you know, displacements and impunity from the Rwandan troops to Congolese militias, what would accountability even look like for the people of Eastern DRC? In your opinion, what will it look like? Do you think that anyone from the UN and or even also the African Union would have the political will to pursue, you know, accountability?
The African Union will need to take charge, they need to lead, because DRC is part of African Union, so they need to take the leadership and ensure that there is a peace or a fact-finding commission that's going to do an holistic analysis and check the root cause of these issues and how to provide solution. And when they provide the solution, they should be honest in ensuring that there is a thorough implementation of everything. And when they do all that, they need to now start understand that if Africans want to go into democratic setting and they want to do democracy, we should do democracy the way democracy is being done. And we should have structure where democracy is done the right way, not the way we are running democracy and somebody feels they're above the law. And now there should be structures, and now it is time for the African Union to now come together and ensure that DRC Congo is given what they need to come back as a nation and as a member of AU, because it is obvious the nation is in tatters. That is just the truth. And if the nation is in tatters, there needs to be a lot of aids coming from the AU to them. And when EU takes this leadership role, believe me, the UN want to come in and they do that. Because whether we like it or not, Africans, like I would say, Africans need to stop depending wholly in the Western world.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Larry Toluhi, political strategist and African affairs analyst in the UK, for joining us and speaking to us on this.
Thank you for having me.